Welcome to the MTB Performance Project. I'm your host, Mickey Bruckner, and on today's show, we have Chris Guarin of Guarin Posture Performance out in the West Coast in California. Chris, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well, my man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. It's always nice to connect from, people from different ends of the country, and always, from my perspective, watching you on social and I got connected with you through Danny Foley. Like, it seems like you're doing a lot of cool stuff out there. So awesome.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I mean, try to keep it busy and try to keep the show going on the West Coast, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's being a strength coach, like, especially when you're trying to help elite performers out, like it's can be a bit of a grind, but it sounds like, and it looks like you're doing a lot of stuff that you thoroughly enjoy. So that's wonderful being able to, pursue a performance and it seems like you're passionate about it, but doing it in a way that you really enjoy it.
Yeah, I've been lucky out here. There's definitely fitness is a big thing out here, right? San Diego, West Coast, California in particular. And luckily, I've been associated with really good people. So ever since the start, kind of what you alluded to even before we hopped on here was, getting with good people, learning from them, and then really trying to build and learn more as you keep growing. So it's been a fun process ever since the start, and yeah, enjoying every bit of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important concept for young coaches to understand. It's something that took me a while to really understand. It is, if you put yourself in the right situation, surrounded by the right people, you can really, you can take your career pretty far. And it sounds like, you have been able to do that based on just the, your company that you've been keeping out there.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly started with some less than unfortunate company, and sometimes you gotta learn
Yeah.
learn it through
Yeah,
that way. I guess knowledge is experience, wisdom is learning from other people's experiences. So I got a
absolutely.
little bit of wisdom when I first started, and didn't completely take advantage of it, and learned the hard way. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's kind of the beauty of most people that kind of usually get into this. It's usually A or B, right? You kind of get out of school and you hop right into it, and then you figure it out along the way, or you go a little rogue and you try a bunch of things, and then in that you learn the right things in business, the wrong things, the do's and do nots, and it kind of creates its own story and journey from there. But yeah, I think it made me really focus and realize the company you keep really kind of portrays a picture of yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I were speaking before we press record, but you're not a physical therapist by trade, but you're more of like a sports performance coach that works in a very specific capacity. But tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got exposed and started in the strength and conditioning world.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of us kind of gravitate into strength and conditioning or physical therapy, usually, from a background in sports, usually from an injury. And then we want to try to fix ourselves, fix other people, and then we realize how fun it is and how cool it is. I don't think I was much different in that regard. A lot of sports when I was younger, then got to a point where I was getting a lot more injuries, and then had persistent kind of back pain, which kind of limited me in my future of playing. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I could have been D1. No, probably not. Half Filipino frame here isn't going to really hold that mass in the NFL. So that dream was, over early. But when I was kind of going through the idea of performance coach and then physical therapy, do I want to be more just strength coach, S&C? And luckily, both sides are typically using similar principles. So you start down one, you start learning more about what one side is saying, you start to learn about the other side, and then you kind of keep going. So when I first got into it, I really fell in love with kind of sports performance, right? I think like a lot of people being an athlete. And in particular, I love the idea of the combine, NFL combine, being fast, being able to showcase that athleticism. And then it kind of was cool because it didn't necessarily only talk about where you had been and what you've done. Maybe you were in a less than great situation, but here you get this chance at the NFL Combine to portray that and hopefully change people's minds. So getting towards that idea of sports performance was something I gravitated towards. But my journey took me way the other direction for a long time. So I guess when you say, my story, I started in sports performance, working with athletes, and usually at that time, a lot of high school and collegiate, mostly high school. And athletes in different ranges, different sports, different levels of development. And it was fun. And I think I mentioned, just a second ago, kind of got involved with someone who I was kind of good friends with, and then realized maybe not the best in business. So I was 19, just kind of helping out, and then ended up in a meeting with everyone that was working on site at the facility, and I was sitting across from other people, and someone stood up and said, "I'm suing you. I'm suing you." I'm thinking, who the hell are you? And at the time, I'm not certified. I wasn't insured. I'm thinking, okay, clearly this guy who I've never seen before is calling some shots that we're unaware of.
Yeah.
Um, Figure out, guy I'm associated with has some negative aspects attached with that. My associations with him now have some different connotations.
Yeah.
Luckily, the people who were on the other side of the table knew that I was a young cat just trying to figure it out and was definitely unaware of that situation.
Yeah.
So I kind of left that facility. And then for about a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years, just meeting people at parks, training, doing speed stuff, getting equipment, studying, learning. And then kind of got an invitation from a buddy actually to go work out at this gym that his brother was at. And I'm like, bro, I'm going to be honest. I've seen him. It's cool. I don't really care too much. But I was like, you know what? Let's go. So we go to check out this facility, and it's beautiful, bro. I mean, it's anything and everything I'd ever wanted. This glass box, it had different stairs that you could run up and down, outside area to work out, private facility, indoor turf, Kaiser stuff. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Like, it was so pristine, it looked like a 5-star club or something. And it was a corporate wellness facility, right? So they have this pretty much this huge amount of cash that they just invest into these facilities. And then they decided to bring on some people to design it and operate. I'm in there working out. I'm like, okay, what the hell's going on here? They had chiropractors on site. They had physical therapy on site. They were doing training. And I was seeing professional athletes. And then I saw like some different type of maybe business as well. So we had Gen Pop. We had pro athletes, a bunch of stuff in this little section in La Jolla. I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I was like, hey, what do I got to do to get in here? Like, I just want to start learning because clearly you guys are doing something I'm unaware of. So that exposure really pushed this whole thing forward after that. And then was lucky enough to find good people, Tyler Bell, TJ Merritt. And they really kind of helped groom me from a young pup in a sense, and just kind of learning where to start and what to try to test out. And that was a pretty open playbook. We used to kind of sit around with the physical therapy on site and the chiropractors on site, and we were sharing clientele and sharing information. And at the time, I'm thinking, what the hell are you guys talking about? Like, they're sharing words, and I'm like, I just want to sit at the big kid table and talk. I couldn't say anything. I didn't know what the hell was going on. So that pushed the next wave of just find information and don't stop. And luckily, they were really smart people. Two in particular, Brandon Marcello and his wife, Jen Reiner, Marcello now. And brilliant people. And I was like, okay, I need to figure out what you guys are doing, how you're doing it. And that's really what I've been trying to strive for. And ever since then, it kind of led me to this place now where different people had questions. How can I help? How can I answer this? Okay, what's this course over there? What's this seminar over there? And just trying to help, to be honest. Working in that corporate wellness setting and working with athletes, a lot of different things came up and a lot of different abilities that they personally had presented themselves. So just wanting to learn and then finding things that seem kind of crazy out there as far as this space. And I was like, let's go. Let's keep diving in. And bro, honestly, it was like that for a decent amount of time. I was lucky to work with that company. We were building different corporate wellness gyms. We were not just designing the fitness centers. We were bringing staff on site. We were training these trainers, grooming them to be managers, blah, 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 and kind of expanding through California with multiple facilities until 2020 hit. And then obviously when no one has to work, no reason to do corporate wellness because ain't no one at work. So I was director of education at that point, and I loved the idea of people who were interested in fitness, like younger coaches, just like I was, eager and wanting to learn. And I was like, well, let's roll. You know what I mean? Like, let's bounce some, stuff off. Let's throw some stuff on the whiteboard, figure out what's happening. And it was great. It kind of also showed me that some people really want to strive to be really good coaches, and some are totally okay just showing up. And you see the people who last, and you see those who don't. So through that 2020 hit, sorry, I'm rambling on about this story, but 2020 hits, no job, no work. I ended up getting a call from a local chiropractor at the time who was actually on the staff of PRI. So Robert Skip George is on the staff of PRI. He had a spot down here in La Jolla and hit me up and said, bro, you want to take over my practice? And I was like, I don't know, it sounds sketchy. To be honest, I was like, what you mean, man? But Skip's a great guy. Skip's a really good dude. And he was like, he has been practicing for a long time. The housing market was hot. He saw an opportunity and he's like, man, I'm not selling you my practice. If you can just take over the leasing payments on this side, there was where I'm at now, small facility, two different areas where you could have pretty much clinical tables in there, right? Do your stuff. So I was just going to pay rent, occupy one of those, and there was another guy. And that was it. So I've been there since that call, which was probably Mother's Day in 2021, and been there ever since. And then that kind of led me into, now you're getting a lot of particular clientele. Now you're going down like pretty much a lot of pain, a lot of restrictions, trying to get out of stuff, haven't found a lot of answers. Really cool stuff because you find some interesting cases that, haven't had any help for years. But kind of what I started with was this appeal in sports performance as well. And mainly the thing is with sports performance, general population sees that. And then when they see it, they want to do it. So it doesn't necessarily always matter how good the information or how much you want to help people. They have to be interested. So the idea was always to learn as much as possible, figure out the best stuff that's out there, and then let's bring it to where everyone can see it and then teach them, right? So I was lucky to be introduced to another really good guy down here in San Diego, Dusty, in Fuso. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his last name correct. And I was like, hey, I see you doing some speed stuff. I've kind of been in an office doing some weird stuff for a long time. Like, can I just see what's been going on? And he was gracious enough to kind of come down, started learning from him and just helping out however I could. If someone had a little injury, this or that, more than happy. And kind of just went, that was maybe once, maybe twice a week for on and off for about a year or so, maybe more. And then once I got married, moved up north a little further in San Diego, at that same time, Les Spellman, who actually just came back into San Diego, started ramping up his training. That happened to be the middle point between me and Dusty, and that commute wasn't necessarily going to work out on that frequency. So I had reached out to Les, and he was also gracious enough to let me come by, and that started that relationship, which led into, working and helping out at Combine, NFL off seasons, and everything like that. Fast forward to this previous year, Danny Foley comes out. We have a big Combine thing, and last time we talked to Danny, I guess he's the one that mentioned my name. So sorry for the long spiel there, but I guess that's kind
No.
of how I'll start all the way to this current
Yeah.
conversation.
No, I think all that context is important. And again, the whole reason I do this is because I think there's value in understanding context
Mm-hmm.
in a coach's story, because you follow people on social media, like I follow you, I follow Danny, and all these names, like you kind of come full circle, and all those like the whole NFL Combine and the love of training and sports performance, it kind of brings you back to where you are now, and it's funny how things happen that way. But I think that's important because so many people might see what you're doing on social media now, right? Like you're on Altus, you're with Danny, you're with Les, and so, but they might see that as a snapshot, and they don't understand the time and effort and constant experience and learning from people and learning from situations, which it sounds like you really have. They don't see that. And so I think it's important for young coaches who want to get to, where a successful coach is, maybe in a setting where they're happy and enjoy what they're doing. Like, it takes time. And hearing that story is just a testament to, you had a focus, right? You knew what you wanted to do, and you just kept going after it and going after it. And I love the fact that in every situation you picked up something of value, right? Like, you were open-minded enough to, go in a situation and learn good or bad from a person or a situation or an individual, all those types of things. And I think that's important and part of the evolution of a strength coach, really.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's funny because a lot of times we talk so much, you talk context.
Mm-hmm.
As professionals in this space, we're typically almost seen by our clientele or by the outside world as this, like, some people, you're out there and people are like, oh, you probably don't even drink. You probably don't even eat ice cream. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
we're
But the
real people
context is
too.
that you're a person and I'm a person.
Yeah,
And the beauty of our space is that we get to work together as a team for one
correct.
common goal, which just happens to be in your favor. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So that's the beauty of it, is kind of working through those ups and downs. And yeah, if everything's always smooth, it's kind of like the old saying, a good sailor doesn't know how to sail or learn to sail in calm seas. Like you
Yeah.
kind of got to go through some ups and downs a little bit. So that's the
Yes.
fun part of it because it builds those calluses.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when I opened my business almost 20 years ago, like I knew about coaching and it was because I was such a good coach, it allowed me to continue to progress in business. But all the lessons I learned in running a business along the way, you don't learn that through the good times. You learn it through the hard times. So I love
Yeah,
it.
all kinds of skill sets. You start to
Yeah.
learn, I mean,
Yes.
this, right? I mean, think about when COVID hit, like everyone's just like, guess who knows how to use a computer now? Like everyone who used to avoid it, like we figured out some skill sets. And that honestly, it pushed a lot of people out too. So it pushed some people out and also invited in a whole nother cast that said, check it out. I actually don't need to do so much and I can create in the field. So the good and bad, right? Like the filtering out process is where you had mentioned is when you have good people like yourself trying to find, you know, good or enlightened individuals out there to help share this information and kind of, direct it. When I was director of education, that's one thing I actually thought I did poorly at was literally directing to education. I almost felt that it was my role to try to learn all this education and then try to represent it, repackage it, which probably was maybe a little bit more about me trying to, ooh, look at what I have for you, compared to really just directing them. So I think, that process and that evaluation time was like, maybe I had a little bit more ego than I initially thought. And maybe it expressed itself by maybe limiting where that could have gone.
Yeah. So given all that experience, how would you kind of see like your role in the performance development continuum with your, it seems like you're working mostly with athletes now. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say right now, definitely a lot of athletes. Gen Pop is always going to be a population as well. I have clients that I worked with for years, right? Very small population. I usually keep that number pretty low. I still get one-off calls a decent amount of time. Hey, I got your number for this and this, that, the other thing. I'm horrible with promotion. I'm absolutely terrible with it. If anyone has looked at my Instagram, they're like, okay, so I don't know what the fuck Chris does or what the hell's going on. Yeah, I'm horrible with it. I'm not great at it. I really just try to do my best, and that's as good as I can do. But I promise I'll do better. So yeah, helping people with any kind of reach out that I can, I'm always happy to help. And anyone that's ever reached out to me, they've probably seen that in the first text. They always happy to help however I can. But it is geared a lot towards that performance setting because yes, I enjoy it. But it's also presented itself a lot more in the in the recent past, with NFL Combine, with NFL off seasons, with Les, and then working a little bit more closely with Danny and potentially more with the Alta staff. So it's geared towards that. But again, I think the fun part is that it's still the similar concepts, principles that most things were kind of derived from, right? We might see it as performance working with elite athletes, but they're still a person, right? Contextually, they're still going through things with a coach in environments, right? With whatever life they're going through. So it's different because of the context, but they're still a person. So applying that to someone who's down the street or in a different state, sometimes, if you're lucky enough to help someone overseas, I think that's awesome because you might never meet that person in the flesh. And, any way that we can use our information to help guide or assist people, I mean, that's kind of the goal. So it's always been any way I can help. You're can't move, I'm in pain, or hey, I'm gonna go run a track meet this weekend. Let's make it happen.
You would, in a lot of your teachings and even in your bio, you talk about posture a lot. From your practice and your perspective, like why, and I agree, but why do you feel posture is so important in respect to just overall movement and performance?
I think posture is a key word to get people attracted. No, I'm kidding. I think that posture is important. I think it is a little, unfortunately, like most things, it becomes a little trendy and gimmicky. I hope that's not completely the case now. But it refers closer to just positions, right? So a lot of times when people come see me, they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm here to work on my posture," and they immediately assume this position. And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, you said you were in pain, so I don't really care about your posture right now. Let's get you out of pain, and then we'll work on, maybe repositioning or changing that posture down the road." But for me, posture, if we're looking at it in that sense, we'll talk about it in position as well. And I kind of have a loose framework of looking at it and how I think it kind of is easy to look at, stemming outwards, inwards to outwards. And I kind of go one, two, three, four, and five, meaning we have one spine, right? We have one central axis. we have two sides of that central axis. And both of those sides can move in three planes of motion. And those three planes of motion can dictate the orientation of these four limbs. And the orientation of these four limbs and all those things are combined and kind of guided through these five primary fascial lines. And using that framework kind of helps guide me of how this person's posture might be trying to navigate through whatever they're trying to do. So when I say posture, is that they're stuck in that position? Can they change into another position? I think the terminology that Altus kind of uses between shapes and patterns works really well there too. Is can you create a shape? Are you capable of getting into this position, this shape? Are you capable of doing another position and shape? How easy are you able to do that and transition through it? So although posture is this term out there and people think that all of a sudden we're going to pull shoulders back and tuck more chins, it's usually pretty opposite. And it's usually more like the term that you actually said, which is like a continuum. It's much more closer to a balancing situation than it is like, oh, now I have the best posture. I mean, for now, I mean, you might turn your head really quick, hit a door, and that's going to change some things a little bit. So, for lack of better terms, I think that posture can be seen as position, but it can also be seen as something as a like a trend that people are really just pushing and coming out with new tools and God knows what else. Like, here are handcuffs, put your hands behind your back forever, and that will pull your shoulders back. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's the best call. So to me, it's more about establishing those positions, those shapes, and then kind of influencing the patterns around them.
From like an overall lens of how you're assessing athletes, you talk about optimal positions. Like everybody's going to be, their optimal is going to be slightly different, and understanding the nuance from person to person. Do you kind of look at from an assessment standpoint, like are there positions or lack thereof inhibiting their ability to move and locomote and do all those types of things? Is that kind of how you're looking at athletes from a pre-test based on like, you know let's talk about in the context of an athlete who's coming to you that's relatively healthy
Mm-hmm.
and is looking to improve performance? Like what are some of the things that you look at? You had mentioned PRI. That's something that I started looking at their stuff almost 10 plus years ago. So I understand a lot of the stuff you're talking about. And I know in our assessment process at my facility, like we look at postural, like positioning and things like that. And a lot of times if you can change and create adaptation there, a lot of times movement improves or joint range of motion improves simply because like they're just stuck in a bad position. Say more a
Right.
little bit about that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to make sure I caught all those questions. I was like, man, there was like at least two or three in there. Um, yeah, so for an assessment process, now I have studied a decent amount of PRI, but it doesn't mean that I haven't studied FRC. It doesn't mean I haven't studied DMS, and nor do I not look at those principles and concepts and everything else that we talk about, fascia and everything else that we enjoy. Because we're all talking the same thing anyways, right? There's just different languages that we choose to do, and then we use those dialects against each other. We'll talk about that later. But so for me, I do have a table assessment, right? A lot of that is somewhat very closely related to like PRI tests, right? Positional stuff. Um, I don't necessarily always have those lead everything. Again, I almost look at it from, well, what's this story telling us? Like, oh, this shoulder doesn't, rotate well, or this femur doesn't. I'm just trying to figure out the story because in the end, like we first said, it's people working together for one common goal. So I really try to almost avoid like overly diagnosing things, and we're trying to figure out why is this happening? What's the story that's reoccurring here that's avoiding the story that you want to tell us, right? Because the story that's going on brought us in. I'm in pain. This is happening. I'm not improving. So why is this story happening, and how can we get back to the one that you want to tell, right? So when we do the table assessment, if I'm doing that, and I'm getting better with a lot more of the fascial and just hands-on, not manipulations, but manual feeling and moving.
We were talking about assessments and kind of the lens you look at in terms of addressing movement and how you're addressing interventions with your athletes.
Yeah, and I think I was even mentioning, I do and use a lot of PRI tests, right? Because I had really dove into that framework and model, and just really loving their education. It's heavy, so I just love diving in, and you could just keep learning a bunch of stuff forever. Um, so I use their assessment because it's been easy for me to kind of just use repetitively. And I got a lot of reps when I was learning this stuff because in the setting at the time was in those corporate wellness centers. So that's having multiple, I mean, we're talking hundreds, close to thousands at each location that sometimes had access. And a lot of them would have free assessments. So that's a lot of free tests of me moving and seeing how people move and getting an idea of what that could mean. Pretty much getting an idea of what the next questions are, right? So now for an assessment, I kind of use a little bit of everything. Seeing how they walk is an assessment, right? I know that that's a big thing whenever I guess nowadays you go to any seminar or any continuing ed, everything's an assessment. And it's really not wrong. I think whenever we sometimes look at it from any lens, fascial lens, biomechanical lens, PRI lens, a neural lens, we start to look at certain things and start to ask questions. I wonder if it means that. And I'm no different. So seeing them walk, if they do anything that if they're talking and there's a tick, sometimes that, leads to another question. Their history gives me a lot. That gives me a lot. And, one thing that I try to do a lot of is when I hear their story and I'm going through my tests, what I feel and what I think the story is physically that I'm moving through, my subjective story, does it match up the story that they said? Because that's where things start to make a lot of sense. Sometimes I'll feel something, I'll have to ask a question. Did you ever have this or did something ever happen? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. Okay, cool. Part of the story that I thought might be going on, but now it's at least uncovered. So really it's everything from history, seeing them walk in, doing the movements. What movements do you do often? What causes pain? What causes discomfort? Where are we currently? Table tests, muscle tests, and then testing all the way through. I mean, force plates are great, right? Getting objective data is amazing. Building force velocity profiles. All that stuff is super useful. I think as long as we don't get carried away in any one of those, we're probably pretty good. So a little bit of everything when it comes to assessment, but more so what you have available. So typically, if you're calling me up and I'm coming to your house, it's me, myself, and I. So we're going to do some, I'll ask about the history. We'll do some table stuff. But if I don't have force plates, I'm not getting that data. I don't have that part of the story or their expression of the story, right? So there's a few things all the way to movement analysis, video analysis. There's a lot out there, but I typically stick to what I have available to me and then kind of work from there.
Got it. And then from your assessment on those things, you're choosing interventions to elicit change in movement capacity or adapt changes in their movement profile or velocity profile, and then essentially prescribing things from there. Given all that context and looking at the lens through that lens, do you do a lot of performance based stuff too? Because it seems like you're kind of working in collaboration with other practitioners. So how is your exposure and what's your bandwidth with athletes in that regard when it comes to like the performance side of it instead of just addressing movement and postural type of positioning and things like that?
Definitely. The way I've kind of looked at it was typically people reach out for treatment or training.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that people reach out for treatment, they stay for training.
Yeah.
So I still have those one-off calls, this and that. Hey, something's hurt. Sometimes you work with certain populations. I had a guy one time who somehow got my number. He plays professional tennis in Serbia and doesn't really speak English. Somehow got in touch with me from a contact in Mexico, and was like, "Hey, I have a guy there. Can you come by this weekend?" Sure. One time thing. He was super stoked. Left. Haven't seen him since. Couldn't tell you anything really much about him because of a language barrier. Um, so anything from that, but really most of what I'm geared for is actually performance. So one, when people ask, what do I do? The closest term probably is performance therapist or performance therapy, right? And providing those inputs to kind of drive more outputs, right? So for me, everything is really based off performance, and the reason I say that is even if someone reaches out and have trouble walking, well, taking a few steps start to become performance, right? So it's a weird way to look at it, but to me, it's no different, right? It's exaggerated. But
Yeah.
when I come over, working with someone, oh, their hip is bothering them, but they're still able to hit some pretty high speeds, this, that, and the other thing. Well, then how can we not change what they're great at and just give them access to more of what they're great at,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's usually not trying to overly change something. I think you brought up a good point is what's the optimal? I have no idea. I have no
Yeah.
idea for any person. I have no idea. Hopefully, we'll just keep learning and learning. Because if we found the optimal, then I mean, you better be breaking records or something. Um, so optimization can kind of be a funny term, even though I use that term and probably more often than most, at least to describe a point. But I don't necessarily know. I look for a lot of connection. I try to figure out what might be in the way. Can we remove that? Or is there something that you need more of? Right? Sometimes it's getting things out of the way that gives you a better output. Sometimes it's giving you more inputs to have a better output. But it's really part of that story. And sometimes things work well for a while and then it stops. So it's, continuum is a great word because it never stops. It's always fluctuating. It's always trying to find balance. Always going to correct in order to do so. So the story is really what drives me, and everything kind of pushes towards that. I'm big on the stories.
Yeah. Yeah. In a lot of ways, if you think about like physical therapy in a sense and bridging the gap between true quote unquote conventional physical therapy to performance is, it's just a regressed version of good training, right? And then just finding like, how can we slowly add load, velocity, complexity to whatever it is that athlete's doing till we ultimately get them back into what is quote unquote optimal for them, right? And or how are we working along that continuum from where they started to where they want to go? That is like, assessments on a day-to-day basis, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
true formal objective or subjective assessments. It's watching our athletes move on their field or on their court in their sport, how they problem solve in certain movement patterns, and then it's just how do we keep moving them along that continuum to get them in a better position.
Right. So actually, so you work with a lot of throwers as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a lot of different strategies there, a lot of
Yes.
cool things to figure out,
Yeah.
things that they're great at. So I'm assuming there's probably been cases that you've had where, in your early years at least, hey, I have an idea. Watch if we do this. Oh, this is gonna change. And then sometimes it just doesn't lead that direction that you want. And you're like, oh shit. Well, I learned what not to do. How do we keep giving you more of what you're good at? And that's kind of like that part of those early lumps that you mentioned in learning, right, in this space, because we all think we have the answers when we start. I tell someone was asking me like, "Oh yeah, you feel like you're learning this?" I was like, "The only year you know everything is your first year. It's the
Yeah.
only year you know anything. After that, you just realize you
Yeah.
don't know shit, and it's totally
Yeah.
cool, and just keep
Yeah.
going." But when you go in with all that expectation that this is the answer, you force
Yeah.
feed it and you force feed it
Yeah.
until you're, curious enough to try something else. So having those instances really defines, oh, you know what? This is just a regression of one thing. And then you realize a regression for one person is a progression for someone else. So it is just modifying this continuum to how do we get you from where you currently are to where you want to be. Right now, we have a really cool case where we have someone who's won Olympic gold medals, but she's never done it after having a child. So new state, new person, new stuff going on. What do we do now? Now, the good thing is the skill and everything there, it's done. It's good. It's ready to go. But we've never been in this spot. So how do we get to where we know we can go, how we know how to get there, but just never from this part?
It's funny you mentioned throwers, and when I was early on in my career, like I looked at like movement as like, hey, this is what every thrower should look like. And then now, as I'm, I work with quarterbacks, pitchers, overhead throwing athletes. I look, again, getting back to your terminology, like I look at shapes and patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I can break it down into simple terms, right? Like all movement should be based off of these fundamental movement principles. And once you start to understand these things, and a lot to do is with like, and this is my next question, getting into things like the spinal engine theory and understanding simple concepts and how, those principles span out into larger concepts. Like the body moves in a certain way optimally, and usually when you're violating those movement principles is when things start to break down, things become less optimal, injuries happen, outputs decrease, all those types of things. And so yeah, it's funny you say that, because I think it just, the better I understand those things in the simplest terms, the more I can reach other people and look at all the different variability between how one person or many people might throw a baseball or hit a
Mm-hmm.
baseball or sprint, right? There's ideal and then there's less ideal, but everybody's going to be slightly different based off of just their body and the way they move. So
Right. And I think that what you just said is kind of the cool part is It's as simple as you can make it and no simpler, right?
Hmm.
When you get these principles. And then we realize we're just kind of talking different stuff. So the
Yep.
people that we meet have learned different languages, right? They've learned different techniques and ways to achieve the same goal that they probably ran into us for, right? So we can't try to overly influence what they believe in unless we give them something that they can feel and then trust in. So it's how do we create this avenue where we're not discrediting, we're just changing the way we're looking at this thing, right? And luckily, we understand the principles that they were talking about. No, we agree with this principle. And there's just other ones that we want to acknowledge as well. So with that, we just guide it this way. And I think that's the easier part. There's always an educational process, but there's also the buy-in needed with, particularly with athletes or anyone that we're working with, is you've heard stuff before. And what you're going to do here is obviously you know that we care, but how do we show you that this is going to be very similar to what you've experienced because it's just life and fitness and pretty basic stuff at the end. But it's just seen differently,
Yeah.
right? And that's what scares people. The packaging is weird.
Yeah.
Packaging is different. I don't know if I like that. You actually did it over there, just not that great. So we're going to do it hopefully a little better over here. Remember how they did that and you didn't like it? Yeah, I know. We're going to do it this way instead. Oh, cool. That felt better. Let's keep rolling. So it's that unveiling the packaging, right, of what's perceived as weird, uncommon, might just be something that becomes more common now, right? The big one is the science question. Well, where's the research? Well, where's the research at? Well, research is a time-based thing. What we're doing right now is being researched. Give us some time and we'll have more research for you. You know what I mean? So it's not like we're discrediting. We just haven't, give us 20 years. Science takes 20 years. We're using the same concepts and principles, but you're just talking of what you're able to read right now.
Yeah. So I mentioned spinal engine theory earlier. I've actually been seeing you teaching a little bit about this. I've recently seen Altus put stuff out like this. Um, I've adapted to that for the last couple of years, especially when it comes to like throwers, right? Obviously, it's closely tied to gait cycle and sprint mechanics and those types of things. Talk a little bit about how you see that in the relationship with how you're working with sprinters and like field sport athletes.
Absolutely. Honestly, for a while, I think Spinal Engine kind of got a bad rap when it first was kind of presented years back. Mainly kind of difficult to maybe talk about, you know, someone walking without
Yeah.
limbs, and then
Yep.
we're going to use this as a model. But really, it's a really decent language for people to look at and see. And what I mean that is movements of language, and when you start to give people an idea of what they're looking at, the lens clears up a little bit, right? It starts to focus in. So I actually do like the idea of the spinal engine theory because I think it gives people a really good framework of what they're trying to see more than anything. It may not be, you have to understand it, but if one thing on one side looks one way and something on the other side doesn't look that way, you start to ask questions of why, right? Is it their strategy? Is it the way that they work out, right? It could be any number of things, but it just starts our questioning further. So for me, when I saw spinal engine stuff, I saw the same thing that PRI does. I saw the same thing that DNS talks about. I see the same thing that David Weck talks about. I see the same thing that FRC talks about. Yeah, I know. I'm going to piss some people off. I see everyone like how we're talking here. I'm like, we're all just talking in different
Yeah.
dialects,
Yeah.
right? And that's actually one of the reasons why when I talk about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's easy to think about we have one central spine. Now,
Yeah.
that central spine connects to two sides. Okay. So if we just talk from a pelvis for our PRI people that love it so much, okay, we have one part of that pelvis which kind of originated from the spine, and we have two other things on the side of it. And their movement from side to side dictates what happens in the center. Well, that starts to make sense. So you're telling me that if I move certain things and stabilize these positions, that maybe that spinal engine starts to work well? Yeah. Well, what happens on top of that engine? Well, there's this other thing called a rib cage, and it kind of moves similar. So you're telling me that each side of top and bottom of this thing dictates how this engine moves? Yeah. It starts to make clear sense, right? So when I see spinal engine stuff, I think it's cool. I think it's cool that we're starting to talk about it, but it is just a theory, right? We have principles, right? The principles are few. Concepts, we get a little further, right? Because that's how we decide to look at it. But then the methods are many because it's how we believe we can express or manipulate or, provide more, not just interest, but benefit from applying these said concepts, but they still derive from principles. So when we look at that, spinal engine is just a thing. It just happens, right? It's no different than explaining why fascial lines may contract and inhibit others or work in tandem at certain timings of gait cycles like we talked about, right? But it's another part of the picture. Okay, so this is how the spine works. Got it. Or is capable of moving, we'll say. And it has two sides. Okay, so each side should be doing something. Yeah. Well, each side has to move in 3 different planes. Oh, shit, okay. And then I have 4 limbs typically, not always, but sometimes. How do those positions or how do they move? Well, are those 4 limbs messing up my fascial lines and abilities to connect and talk? Well, if I'm messing up communication and I'm trying to figure out why my engine, we'll call it a spinal engine, isn't maneuvering the way I was hoping, well, now I have to break it down. Is it the limb? Is it this? Is it the plane of motion? Is it the orientation? Is it the side? Is it the spine? It just starts to ask more questions. So spinal engine, I think, is a great way to look at what could be going on. It's a great place to start asking questions. Because before, I think even some places, Dan Paff is really good at talking about this stuff, but undulation of pelvises and rib cages and scapulae and all that kind of stuff, no different than similar concepts that you've heard from PRI. No different than, positions and concepts for intra-abdominal pressure, right? Of why we need those, and to get vertical force compression for propulsions in force velocity profiling and horizontal forces of where force vectors are supposed to go. So it's fun because it's a talking point of maybe where we can start. And for me, I think it's easy for people to just start with one thing. And if that one thing happens to just be connected in the middle, man, now we can start to stem out. But a lot of times when we have these methods that are so far, I don't know, sometimes the dialects get in the way and we try to prove a point. No, it's this. No, it's that. Who cares? Go back to the principle. We need to work on this and that. Got it. How do we want to do it? Well, let's do this, and then we can add in multiple concepts and methods. Who cares? Do a FRC thing with a PRI breath and a web method shaker and a freaking Z Health iPad. I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You do it with a 1080 attached to you. I really don't care. But the goal is do something effective, do something efficient, and let's help get this story where it needs to go.
Yeah. If nothing else, I think it creates a simpler model of movement
Mm-hmm.
and just understanding how reciprocally everything moves together in the body. And to me, that got me understanding better, like the movement of gait cycle and sprinting, but then also like how it relates to throwers, like just the reciprocal nature of how the spine interacts with the pelvis, and the rib cage interacts with the spine, and then the scapula, and how that drives proximal to distal range of motion and just overall performance. And it like, to me, it just made it so much simpler, because again, it spoke a common language, right? And like you
Yeah.
said, because there are so many different ways to look at it, but as soon as you can just parse it down to its simplest terms, then it's like, huh, now I understand. And so, like,
One thing, right?
that's something I try to really get my athletes to understand. Like, when we move, like, yeah, there's certain parts when I train athletes, there's times where we're forcing output, we're driving output, whether it's like load, velocity. That's like on a big lift, like that's the main thing we're trying to do for that specific lift. And now from there, let's use these accessory lifts, these auxiliary lifts, to say, now we're driving quality movement, like the brain to body connection, like getting you to
Mm-hmm.
feel how to move in these different, like these 3 dimensions, rather than just bilateral sagittal plane movement, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's where it's important to understand these things, because now you can start to link, hey, we're building on this strength and output. Now let's tie it back to, again, movement, which at the end of the day for athletes, movement's the foundation, right? If we can't move, all this other stuff is just wasted energy. So
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we talk about a lot is we look at outputs a lot, and which is great because that's what makes money. But what keeps money, right, is you on the field doing your thing, right?
yes,
You staying in the game. The best ability is still availability. It always has been, always will be.
yeah,
So it's great when we can do cool things. It's even better when we can do cool things all the time or more often, right? So a lot of times when people reach out in performance therapy, and kind of a lot of exactly what you do and what you talk about, is it's not just we're trying to increase performance, which we know is the underlying goal. But we know that if we're impaired due to pain or discomfort, even we'll just call it discomfort, because we know athletes aren't going to say they're in pain unless
yeah,
they're honest, which they're not. So we'll call it discomfort, right? So
yeah,
they have discomfort. They're going to, oh, well, that's why we see this. In the first book we got into, we talked about having discomfort and pain leads to compensation.
Hmm.
So we don't have to overly think about it. We just have to address it, right? Sometimes we just acknowledge things without addressing it. Just address it really quick. It doesn't have to be a big intervention. It just has to be even a question is addressing it sometimes because you made a note of it. So yeah, I think we get carried away sometimes. We really try to get stuck on proving points because we like them, right? We love certain methods that we attach to. We love certain languages because when we're good at speaking languages, oh boy, do we feel great about ourselves. So being open to what you said is gives us one common language, looking at one thing, this spinal engine. Cool. Now let's ask questions because it's funny, right? We get back to spinal engine, and the big things that are like crazy to people is that the flex or the spine can flex, extend, side bend, and rotate. People are like, "Holy shit!" And it's like, why is this so foreign? Right? And it's foreign because we made it uncommon. So it's unfamiliar because we made it uncommon. And now we're getting back into this, oh, now I get it. And baseball utilizes it probably more than most sports, right? You get these long levered people with a massive amount of torque and expression, one thing to do, and just, for lack of a better term, try to maximize it, right? And for them, it makes sense because that lead leg, right? You can push, but what are you pushing? You're not pushing your lead leg, you're pushing you. You push you and then you get rid of that thing. So when they start to realize that, I'm sure, and you worked with significantly more throwers, but it gives them that language, the idea of where they are and not these distant parts. Don't worry about that whipping action at the end. It's supposed to just happen. Focus in here and then let that beauty roll.
To me, it's like looking at a mocap test for a thrower, right? What are the first two origins of velocity? They're basing it off of pelvis and trunk, right? And then then it's like, how do we directly, not only from a force and velocity standpoint, but from a timing and execution and efficiency standpoint, just like there's a a point in which a sprinter has to create tension and then relaxation. It's an oscillatory thing where they're going in and out of tension and relaxation. Same thing with throwing. Like certain parts of the body have to create tension and relaxation at certain periods of time, and there's a sequencing to that. And so understanding how, again, putting it back to the spinal engine and gait cycle and just how those all those structures work together just simplifies it. And now you can get athletes to speak that language, right? Like if they're looking at this stuff, it's starting to become more common in
Exactly. Yeah.
athletes. And the challenge becomes is I get athletes who come to me and they're like, yeah, I did this mocap test and the person said like my sequence is out of order. I'm like, okay, so now what? Right? Like I think too often, and it happens a lot. And like these people sell these athletes on like this fancy tech but they have no idea what to do with it. Like yes, there's if clearly inefficiencies in your kinematic sequence. Now what? How do you take that in? And so that's something that like that's what kind of got me down all of this rabbit hole of like spinal engine theory and moving, is because it helped me better understand how do I take a poor sequence and make it a better one.
Mm.
And so that's how, like, for me, like that's how, like, this was like the lens at which I looked at it. And I don't think enough people are doing that because they, like, again, they don't think of it in its simplest terms. And so yeah, I kind of went down a rabbit hole there.
No, but I
So
agree, right? Because that's the thing. We go to school, we take these tests, and a lot of it is like brace, hold. This is what we studied,
yeah,
research. We have a lot of research on it. We proved it. We love it. Keep it in the
yeah,
books. But we just overemphasize it,
yeah,
right? And we get to the point where we forget about just fundamental, basic
yeah,
shit. And then we
yeah,
try to create these, oh no, it has to be this way. And actually, it's only that way because of we're trying to create answers for issues that may not even exist, right? But I think what you mentioned too is not just in the language that we communicate, right, in our profession, but the way that people get to hear it too, right? There's this really weird thing about when you talk about people's spines. You get really emotional about it. Maybe because it connects to your brain. I have no idea. But you get really emotional when you talk about their spines, right? My spine messed up in my line. Who cares? Don't worry about it.
yeah,
You're fine. You're still breathing. You look great. Happy for you.
yeah,
But when they get this idea of, oh, I'm cautious with my back because it's supposed to hold firm like a pole because that's what I was told and now the world's scary. When they hear this idea of spinal engine, oh, this is supposed to move free? I'm allowed to do this? It's the language to them is way less cautious. It's way more expressive. And that freedom alone of just our language to the athletes or the clientele, that changes so much, right? When we're talking context, you tell me to brace and hold and run as fast as I can. It's going to look a little different if you say open up and be free,
yeah,
right? And The reason you're saying open and be free is because they're holding it.
Yeah.
So the language that this spinal engine has probably allowed our clientele and athletes the freedom to express more without this limitation of, wait, but you said to hold in place and never let go. It's like, well, don't let go of the ball until you want to. But besides
Yeah.
that, like, let it rip. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think that's a cool point that I really haven't thought of until we just kind of brought it up.
Yeah. As we talk about this stuff and always thinking about ways of maybe better applying and implementing these types of principles into our training, I work with a lot of quarterbacks, and they're a unique population. In baseball, they're getting better. Like the principles that are driving performance and how we look at performance in baseball, it's getting a lot better, and it's evolved only because has had to evolve because of the amount of injuries for so many years. In the quarterback population, and now you started to work with a lot of uh, football athletes in the last couple of years. You know, they're very much entrenched in the conventional form of strength and conditioning, right? You look at the conventional strength and conditioning model in college. It's a lot of bench, squat, deadlift, hang clean, power clean, all those types of things. It's bilateral sagittal plane movements.
Remember when Jay Cutler came out in the draft and everyone was like, he benched 405. They're like, he's the best ever. It was like, what the
Yeah,
hell?
but like now it's a population and environment that I still am seeing like slow to understand and adapt some of these principles. How, when you're working with these football players, how are some ways that you're starting to implement with them? So, clearly it's not an output thing for many of these elite athletes, right? Like I saw some of the guys you worked with this season, off season, and getting ready for the combine, and those are some dudes, and like they're strong, like they fall into the category of strong enough. So how much of the time are you spending working on outputs versus just movement variability, movement quality, movement competency?
Hmm. Good question. I think during that process in particular, we are looking at outputs because it's a select time frame. We know that there's metrics that we're looking to hit, and if we can hit those metrics, it shows up when needed. So that has been mapped out, and Les Bowman has done a phenomenal job at it. I mean, better than anyone in the business, and it's a work of art to see. The way that he has it programmed out, split, looking at that is great. So a lot of what we do is, being performance driven in performance therapy, it's still output driven to me, but it's really looking at the inputs needed. So the way I kind of look at it is almost like the more precise the input, a more accurate we can get on the output. So what kind of precise inputs can we get in whatever time we're allotted, based off the training, based on the context at hand? But what are the inputs needed or most valuable at this time to give us the outputs needed at this time? So everything that we do as coaches, I believe, are pretty much inputs. Coaching and telling someone a cue is somewhat of an input, right? They hear it, they perceive what that means, they go and attempt to do what they believe it means, right? You push on someone as a manual therapist. I'm going to try to release this, right? We're going to do a technique or an intervention, see what it does. So the inputs, I think, are really what we have the ability to kind of, how do you say, intervene with. But
Mm-hmm.
they're still driving outputs, right? I
Yeah.
mean, output for someone, for me, although we might not be measuring, is can you walk without pain? Great. There we go.
Yeah.
Now, right away, um, maybe this kind of answers another question earlier that I may have not addressed well enough is once they're out of pain, we have the light, we have the green light, and it
Yeah.
is go time. So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily like, let's take all the time in the world. We are adaptive by nature. So take advantage of the adaptability. When the body is feeling good and capable, give it more of that influence. Educate it in the manner in which it knows how to get stronger in this sense, in this manner, position, pattern, whatever. But those are the opportunities you want to take advantage of, I believe, right? So from there all the way through performance, the way that we've integrated it, I think we actually started using similar concept that Altus had used years ago, or a couple of years back at least, and very low. They're not loaded, safe positions, and just reps. Just reps. Can you side bend? Cool. Let's just do a few reps. Go 10 here with one knee in front. Cool. Switch sides. Let's go 10 here. Just explore that range. See what that's like. And for most people, because of the way that we've told them to train and trained ourselves, that is newfound ground. You know what I mean? So moving sideways, the next day you're like, oh shit, what the hell? Now, luckily, those are kind of safe to fail, right? In the sense of they're not loaded. We're not going to keep them there and push on them and add torque and things that we know and believe aren't safe. But little bit of movement to explore. Okay. At most, holding a PVC. Cool. How about rotation? Sure. Let's explore those ranges. So what I think is good in any time frame or any new addition to something like this, keep it safe, but it's repetitive, right? You got to do it all the time. So just like anything that we have given anyone, right? Like, why can't I just strength train once a week? You gotta do it because there's this thing called adaptation, and your body gets stressed, and it's really cool, and then it changes. It's no different, right? So accessing new space, it has to be interpreted, it has to be felt, it has to be explored before it can really be adapted in the way that we wanted it to. So from day one, a lot of the times, we start with low-level movements that can begin this expression of a spinal engine pattern. We're not necessarily trying to guide the pattern or teach the pattern. We're just letting them explore and see what comes of it. And usually it gives them a lot more, freedom of expression, to be honest with you. We start to see more rotation. But then it also expresses, hey, you're doing this great on one side, but maybe a little less than great here. And remember that thing you've been talking about? I think they might be related. So let's go check out this knee in this way, and we're going to influence it not just here before you hit the field, but also afterwards in the weight room, like you were saying. This is where we can really build on top of it is, yeah, you had this great neural expression, but what it's starting to learn and adapt to right now is really important. So let's go here and let's just do this. But didn't we do something slight and I want to do the barbell? Don't worry about it. Your communication with your body is really important right now. That
Yeah.
barbell is never going to come on the field, I promise you. It's
Yeah.
never going to appear on the 50-yard line when you're going up for a pass. No one's shoving that barbell at you. I promise you're good.
Yeah.
So get the person better, get the person better in their space, get that person better at moving in space, and then we can move some things in space. So it's a fun, easy way to kind of just look at it when we're taking any concept or principle from a level of pain or hard to move all the way to let's express this spinal engine pattern, because I'll use it as an assessment tool. Hey, ooh, that felt weird. And they'll tell you, oh, this side felt harder. Perfect. What does that mean? What could it mean? Who knows? Let's do something else. And we keep building. And so it's a lot of questions. I think something that you probably run into a lot is, well, what's the best thing? Or how would you? A lot of context, and it usually adds another question at least. So it just keeps going and going. But the safe way for anyone that was out there listening how to implement with a team setting or something, low level, moderate reps, it's acute. Keep it acute, but keep it often.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's like if you're in a one-on-one setting, maybe you might use like objective testing or subjective testing to take inventory about how that athlete's feeling on a day-to-day basis. Take that inventory, maybe field out and create some interventions so we can create a window of opportunity to apply stress, right? Whether it's in whatever setting. But from like just a normal day to day, just watching an athlete move and, like high volume but low intensity type of movements, just constantly moving them through different spinal range of motion. And as they're doing that, like let them kind of be the guide of where they're feeling restriction, if not, and then, kind of advising and taking interventions from that standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people all the time, when they come to me, oh, I hope you have this. I'm like, honestly, you probably have the answer. I got a lot of questions. I got a lot of
Yeah.
questions. We're gonna try some stuff. We're gonna do some stuff, and then as long as you give me good answers, it feels better. I like this. I feel
Yeah.
powerful. I feel lighter. Those are good answers,
Yeah.
right? How do you feel? Ooh, that sucked. Bad
Yeah.
answer. Bad intervention. Got it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
And
that
then,
just takes the ego out when you just realize they got the answers.
yeah. And then the most important thing is like now we're creating context and an understanding for them so that if you're not right by their side and they're out on the road and they're competing and they're warming up for a game, like, oh shit, this doesn't quite feel right. Oh, I know what to do and to get myself back in an optimal or better position, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and just like you said, I think the term you use is one I use a lot. Take inventory.
Yeah.
See what's going on. See what you got. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because one day you're like, oh, it's so great. The next day you're like, not so great. Now, if it's a one-on-one setting or even in a group setting, one thing we've done is how can we take a small amount of time right now using an intervention, and usually those interventions are going to be trying to address whatever we saw in that lack of spinal engine rotation, X, Y, or Z, lack of power output, whatever we see, right? But it gives us those little bedrocks to kind of start on and say, from here, we can add this, let's try this, let's activate that, and then let's see it again.
A couple of things I want to finish with. It seems like like we kind of talked about earlier, like you're a product of your environment and the people you spent around. Like, what would you say, like what or whom might have been the biggest influence in your development as a coach?
Ooh, who? Ooh, man. First off, I probably apologize to everyone that I haven't mentioned. Honestly, it's as a professional. This is kind of probably a lame answer, but I'd probably say my wife, Serene, to be honest with you. And the reason I say that is she gives me the ability and the confidence to go out and do this stuff. Um, and it's for me as a professional, I can go out there and I feel completely free and open to try anything and everything I want to. Like she's like my support. Because there's people in that I've come across in my profession who have guided me in ways to look at things and learn things, but that's just for me, and I don't necessarily always know what to do with it. And then she kind of can see the picture when I'm in the frame, and she gives me that feedback that I usually need to hear, that I've probably heard from a lot of these great coaches and people I've had in my life. But a lot of times I'm getting it from her, and let's be honest, it usually means something when I'm hearing it from her. And I'm like, damn, maybe I overlooked that part. And then professionally, there's so many people who have guided me in so many different ways. One that comes to mind is a buddy of mine, Chris Daly, who's unfortunately no longer with us. But he had a really good way of looking at it, and sometimes it's not about being right or wrong; it's about being honest. And that alone probably carries a lot of weight for me in my profession, being in the sense that it's just about trying to do your best sometimes. It's not always about being the best, but as long as we try to do our best for the right reasons, maybe we're closer to being honest and not overly worried about is this right or wrong, because I can live with that. So those words from my buddy who, I know is looking down on everyone, um, that and definitely, my wife as far as support and just giving me words to see everything that I'm trying to, on my inputs, you know what I mean? Trying to get these outputs. And then she kind of helps me when I need that direction. And there's so much. I feel bad that I'm leaving out so many people, but as far as what's really driven me as a professional, I've named a decent amount of people. But I'd leave it with the one quote from my buddy is, it's not about being right or wrong, it's just about being honest.
I love that, and it seems like you were fortunate to have the people that support you throughout the way, and really kind of inspire you to take in inventory of like how you want to do things. And I think a lot of times people find themselves in situations where they just kind of get stuck, and then they just kind of spin their wheels for so many years, and they're too afraid to make the leap. And um, yeah, I love hearing other strength coaches who are in a good situation, loving what they're doing, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, man, it's cool because there's so many people, especially out here, that have helped me, and I'm not here without them. And so many great minds, and so many that I'm still meeting and learning from. It would be a discredit to any one of them if I were to single them out. But yeah, it's been a blessing and a complete honor.
given your current viewpoint from the current state of like strength and conditioning, like how do you see like the growth in our field, given like the lens through which you're looking at performance and working with your athletes?
I think two things come to mind. I think where we're going as an industry is exciting. I think we're getting more people that are trying to look at things and bring things together first, making sense of things, which is another great part. Um, I also think that because we're learning so much, there is a potential for more dialects to expose themselves. And what I mean by that is there are more courses and seminars and potential concepts and educational content out there that if we continue to pull ourselves away and create our different languages, we're going to kind of end up in similar silos, but now talking in different languages.
I like that.
Because it's almost seemed more macro at first, but now it seemed like it might become more micro.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because now, like breathing, right? What a great topic to talk about.
Yeah.
Phew, what's the right way? I don't know. Just don't stop. So breath work is kind of, like
Yeah.
breath work is a huge topic now, which is
Yeah.
great because we've only been living for, thousands and thousands of years. But now we're back at breathing is important. So even in the breath work, silo, we'll call it, people use different terms. People are trying to say what's right, what's wrong, and the right ways to breathe. And like, we forget that we're talking about a person. You know what I mean? Don't worry about it. Like it's a person. Just don't stop breathing. We're good. Let's keep working on it. HRB, just do some push-ups right now. We'll put that on you when you get there. So I think that the cool thing is it's exciting that we're so interested to try to do more, but I'm worried that we may not be trying to do more together. And I think the more that we can try to do together, maybe we'll eventually create something that's closer to what we've been envisioning for a long time. Um, but there is a potential that we get pulled the other direction, and I'm hopeful that it's not.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective because I've never thought of it that way. Do you think that, maybe in this world of trying to create differentiation amongst each other, like we may take a key concept and then and create like our slightly small spin on it just to create like some level of differentiation amongst, other quality people, rather than just saying like, hey, you do a really good job, you do a really good job, I do a really good job. It might be a little bit different, and that's fine. All it is at the end of the day is, how do we meet the athlete where they are, right? And how do we help them along their journey?
Yeah, there's definitely seems to be a little bit of celebrity involved now, which is pretty comedic because we work with people who are much closer in celebrity than we will
Yes.
ever be.
Yeah.
But we like to believe it, right? We have our people who click the buttons, and we're like, "Ooh, nice." Yeah, I think as long it goes back to what you started with, my man. We get the right people, good people trying to do good things, then something great can come from that. It's that filtering out process that takes some time, because sometimes you got to figure out what people are really going for, and sometimes there's some good actors out there, for better or worse. So I think that it's cool. Again, I think it's very exciting. But as long as we got people like yourself and others out there that are more looking at the picture at the cause of what we can do together and not discrediting one thing to try to prove another, everything can be justified. I mean, I tell people all the time, thousands of years ago, we were so positive that the Earth was flat, and then we knew that it was round, and now we don't know anymore.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
we're debating again, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's 2025. Like we're going to space for fun, and so with all
Yeah.
those things that are out there, if we can come together and just realize, hey, these are principles, right? Like we didn't necessarily invent these, right? You found a cool, beneficial way of implementing it, talking about it, and expressing it, and it's helped a lot of people. But if you start to see yourself as someone who was able to do that alone and that you sit above, then we take out the context that you're a person as well. So that goes back to my, thing about celebrity is, if it was about you, a celebrity, then it definitely did not become about them. So morality or that whole part of it kind of gets a little skewed, and that's a whole whatever. But yeah, I'm hopeful that we trend the right way. And again, it's with people like you that I have a lot of confidence that it will.
Yeah. And maybe in some way it's, unfortunately, people with ego, like they use this platform and this media and this job or whatever as a way to kind of serve themselves, when at the end of the day it's not about us. It's about the people we're serving, right? It's because
Hmm.
it's that's our role. Like our job is to serve the people in front of us. And um look, I'm not going to sit here and say I never had ego when it came, like, what I think ego was an important part of my young development because it drove me to continue to be better, right? But now I look at my growth of like the people around me, right? Like how can I, it's not about me anymore. It's how can I improve the lives of my athletes, of my team who work for me, and live in abundance where everybody wins, right? If I win, right? And I think that's sometimes where I think some of the negative parts of this world of strength and conditioning world is it can be a little bit nasty, and maybe that's where people are starting to really pull themselves apart. So
Yeah, and let's be honest, it's fun too. Let's be
yeah.
honest, we enjoy this stuff. We like nerding in, and we get some people that want to learn from
Yes.
us, and we're like,
Yes.
oh, like
Yeah.
maybe I do have something. Maybe I am valuable, which isn't a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like having that part of it, and I don't think having an ego is a terrible thing either. Like you said, it's a very real thing. And I have no ego. Yeah, you got a little bit. You're a human. It's okay. Um, so it's not a bad thing, but
Absolutely.
resorting back to what's the goal, what's the purpose, because we're all capable of going further than we want to go. And that's not the point, that's the acknowledgement of it. But what was the point? What's the purpose? Maybe it's not necessarily. Maybe it is, right? Hey, you want to run a business? You're going to have to post more on social media. I'm talking to myself here, right?
Yeah.
So there's things that you got to do to kind of play the game because that's where it is. But the way you look at it is different. For me, it's been very difficult to just say, every time I go to post or something, is am I just doing this because it's cool because I think I'm smarter or better than people? And I didn't know how to answer those questions. And it's helped people like Les and Danny. And it's like, hey, people want to learn from you. Like people want, like you have stuff that people are interested in. So you're not promoting yourself to get something. You're helping answer questions, which I happen to somewhat enjoy if I can help, which I typically don't have the right answer. But I can help ask another one. You know what I mean? So I think as long as we can do our best to not, you know, I kind of try to say what they're saying too. Don't let what you want to say get in the way of what they need to hear. And sometimes that keeps me from talking when I should, but definitely keeps me from over talking. So there's a balance. And I think that eventually we all try to find it and then we probably lose it like every other continuum. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to see. And as long as we get the good people doing good things, man,
Yeah.
something great will happen.
I love it. I love it. Well, Chris, I appreciate your time. Been really good. Where, if people want to see more about what you're doing and kind of learn about the stuff you're teaching out in California, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, although I just said I'm horrible at marketing and posting on social media, I would say reach out on Instagram. I am going to try to be a little bit more active in there now, due to oh so popular. No, I'm kidding. Just due to trying to help more and just get some
Yeah.
thoughts out there. I have had some people ask questions, so any way that I'm able to help, I'm more than happy to. So that'd be one. If you have any direct questions, feel free to DM me there. I think I have my email there. Shoot me an email. Again, I am happy to help however I can. Usually that will either me doing something or even directing you towards that. Um, but yeah, and then hopefully if you're in Southern California, feel free to hit me up and swing by.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the show. It helps us uh, gain more followers and reach more people and get guys like Chris on and spread the word. So thanks so much, Chris. As always, appreciate your time, brother.
Thank you, my man. Thanks again. It's been great.